My mother gave my daughter a summer job at her company. She came home in tears every day. What happened today? I asked. She made me scrub the bathroom while the interns laughed, she cried. I marched into that office with one question. What she said still haunts me. I never thought that a simple summer job at my mother's company could turn into a nightmare for my daughter, Lila. But looking back, it all makes sense now, every little thing I missed, every warning sign I didn't see. It started off innocently enough, or at least that's how I convinced myself. Lila had just graduated high school, and as much as I wanted her to enjoy a carefree summer, I knew it was time for her to get some experience under her belt. My mother, Sylvia, had always been successful, climbing the corporate ladder with a kind of ruthless precision. She was the kind of person who believed in hard work, tough love, and making people earn their place in the world. I thought maybe a summer job with her would be good for Lila. It would teach her discipline, responsibility, and give her a leg up on her career in the future. Lila was hesitant at first, not because she wasn't eager to learn, but because she had seen the way my mother operated, always cold, always direct. Still, I reassured her. It'll be good for you, I told her. You'll get to see how a real business works. And Grandma will make sure you're well taken care of. She agreed, though I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. That was the first red flag, but I ignored it. The first few days seemed fine. Lila would leave for work in the morning, and by the time she came home in the late afternoon, I'd ask her how it went. Her responses were vague, nothing to suggest that anything was off. But she also wasn't exactly glowing with excitement. Still, she'd been excited to have a job, and I thought maybe she was just getting into the swing of things. But after about a week, I started noticing changes in her behavior. She was coming home later and later, and when she did, her eyes were often red, as if she'd been crying. She didn't talk much, and when she did, her answers were short, distant. I couldn't ignore it anymore. One evening, as she sat at the kitchen table picking at her food, I decided to ask. What happened today? I asked, my voice gentle but full of concern. She hesitated, not looking at me as she poked at her food. I could tell she was struggling with something, but she didn't know how to say it. Nothing, she mumbled, her voice barely audible. But I could see it in her face, something was wrong. I didn't push her that night. I let it go, thinking maybe it was just a tough day, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. The next day, she came home early, and I could tell right away that something had happened. She was shaking, her eyes filled with tears. I took her into the living room and sat her down, my heart racing with worry. What happened today? I asked, my voice tight with fear. She looked up at me, her lips trembling, and then she whispered, she made me clean the bathrooms, all of them. While the interns watched and laughed. My heart sank. This wasn't what I had imagined. My mother wasn't exactly warm and fuzzy, but she was never cruel. They laughed? I asked, trying to understand. Lila nodded, her shoulders shaking. Yeah. They said I should be lucky to even be there, that I wasn't doing anything important. And Grandma, she didn't say anything. She just let them. She told me I needed to learn the value of hard work. I felt my stomach churn. My mother, the woman who had always been a symbol of strength and achievement to me, had let this happen. Not only that, but she had encouraged it. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Lila, this isn't right. You shouldn't have to be treated like that. You should never feel less than anyone else, especially not by family. But Lila was quiet, too embarrassed to argue. She was still processing what had happened, I could tell. I hugged her tight, feeling the weight of her sadness press against me. The next morning, I couldn't just sit back anymore. I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure how to approach it. Was I overreacting? Maybe this was just my mother's way of toughening Lila up, teaching her the ropes of the corporate world. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about that. It was about power, control, and humiliation. And I wasn't going to let my daughter be anyone's punching bag. So, I did what I knew I had to do. I went to my mother's office. I walked into her building, my mind racing, heart pounding. I knew the confrontation was inevitable, but I didn't expect to feel so small walking through those polished glass doors. I was her daughter, yet I felt like I was walking into enemy territory. Her office was exactly as I remembered it, sleek, cold, efficient. Sylvia, my mother, sat behind a massive desk, her face impassive as always. When I entered, she didn't look up immediately, but I could feel her eyes on me. "I need to talk to you about Lila," I said, my voice a little firmer than I intended. I didn't want to give her any chance to avoid the conversation. She looked up finally, her eyebrows raised in slight surprise. "What about her?" she asked, her tone flat. "She's been crying every night, Mom," I said, my frustration starting to show. "You're making her scrub bathrooms while the interns watch and laugh. You're humiliating her. Why are you doing this?" She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms as if she were considering my words carefully. "She's here to learn, not to get special treatment," she said, her voice still detached. "I'm teaching her discipline. If she can't handle a little work, then she doesn't belong here." "Discipline?" I asked, incredulous. "You're treating her like a servant, not an intern. She's your granddaughter." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "She's not my granddaughter in this office. She's an employee. She needs to learn the value of hard work, and that means doing what everyone else does. No one gets special treatment here." I stared at her, my mind racing with anger and disbelief. My mother, the woman who raised me, had always pushed me hard, yes, but she had never treated me like this. I had never been humiliated in front of others, never been made to feel less than. And now, she was doing this to Lila, her own blood. "She's not an employee, Sylvia," I said, my voice low and shaking with rage. "She's a teenager, and she's your family. You shouldn't be treating her like this. You should be guiding her, not breaking her down." Her expression was unreadable, but I could see a flicker of something, maybe regret, maybe annoyance. "I'm doing what's best for her," she said, her voice quieter now. "No, you're not. You're doing what's best for you," I shot back, my heart pounding. "This isn't about toughening her up. This is about your ego, about showing power over someone who can't fight back." There was a long silence. I waited, but she didn't say anything. I could see her posture stiffen, her walls coming back up, but something had shifted in the room. The conversation had gone from tense to uncomfortable. I wasn't sure where we were going with this, but I couldn't walk away without a resolution. "I'm taking her out of the job," I said firmly. "She won't be working here anymore." Sylvia's gaze hardened. "Fine," she said flatly, her tone almost dismissive. "It's your decision." I didn't respond. I just turned and walked out of her office, feeling like I had just made a choice I couldn't undo. I had defended my daughter, but at what cost? My relationship with my mother, the woman who had always been a part of my life, was now strained. I wasn't sure if it could ever be fixed. And as I left her office that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just torn a piece of my family apart forever. But I couldn't just stand by. Not when it came to Lila. She was mine to protect now, and I wasn't about to let anyone tear her down, especially not my own mother. The days after I took Lila out of the job felt like a blur. I'd been expecting some kind of emotional fallout, but what I hadn't anticipated was how deeply the entire situation had affected me. Lila was quiet, more withdrawn than I'd ever seen her. Her confidence, which had always been subtle but present, seemed to have taken a huge hit. She didn't want to talk about her time at my mother's company, but I knew the scars were there. They weren't just physical, they were emotional. I could see it in her eyes every time I asked how she was doing. I tried to reassure her, but the words felt hollow. How do you tell your child that everything will be okay when you're struggling to figure out what okay even looks like in this situation? I didn't know if it was the right decision to pull her out. Maybe there was a way to salvage her job, to make my mother understand. But as the days went on, I realized that there was no going back. The damage was already done. I had tried to reach out to Sylvia several times after that confrontation. Texts, phone calls, even emails. Each time, I got no response. And I didn't want to push her too hard. I knew she could shut me out completely if I tried. But the silence was deafening. The guilt began to eat at me. Was I being too protective of Lila? Was I wrong to involve myself in what was supposed to be a learning experience? My mother had always said that life wasn't fair, that the world didn't care about your feelings, and I'd always agreed with her. But now, as a mother myself, I couldn't help but feel that there had to be a line somewhere. There had to be a limit to how much you could push someone before they broke. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after Lila's exit from the job, I decided to go visit my mother again. I needed to understand. I needed her to explain herself. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been before, but I was hurt. I needed closure. I drove to her office, my stomach in knots. The building was exactly how I remembered it, sterile, professional, devoid of warmth. It felt cold to me now, a stark contrast to the woman who had raised me. Sylvia's assistant buzzed me in. I hadn't even made it to her office door before I was greeted with her usual stoic, unyielding gaze. "Sit down," she said, not bothering to offer any pleasantries. Her tone was as cold as her office. I could already tell this wasn't going to be a conversation where I'd get any easy answers. I sat across from her, folding my hands in my lap. I could feel the tension in my body as I tried to steady myself. "I wanted to come by and talk," I started, my voice steady but carrying the weight of everything I'd been holding back. "About Lila. About what happened at your company." Her face remained unreadable, but she nodded, motioning for me to continue. "I don't understand what you were thinking, Sylvia. She's your granddaughter, and you treated her like she wasn't even a person. She came home crying every day, and I couldn't just sit by and let that happen," I said, my voice shaking slightly with the emotion I hadn't let myself feel until now. Sylvia looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "I gave her a job. A job where she had to earn her place. She's not special, Sarah. She needs to understand that no one gets to coast through life just because of who they are. She needed to be taught that." "I know that life isn't easy," I replied, "but what you did wasn't about teaching her anything. It was about breaking her down. She's a teenager, Sylvia. Not an intern. Not an employee. She's your granddaughter." Sylvia sat back in her chair, her fingers steepled together as she processed my words. There was a long pause, one that made the air between us feel even colder. Then she spoke, her voice quieter than before. "You think I was too hard on her," she said, almost more to herself than to me. "You think I'm wrong for wanting her to toughen up. I see that now, Sarah. But it's not that simple." I could hear the faintest tremor in her voice, and for a brief moment, I wondered if this was the Sylvia I had grown up with, the one who showed up at every school event, who demanded excellence from herself and everyone around her, but who also, deep down, just wanted to see me succeed. Maybe this was her way of showing love. Maybe this was her twisted version of care. "I know what you're thinking," she continued, looking at me with a sort of weary resignation. "I know that you think I'm just trying to control everything, to push people to be something they're not. But I'm not. I'm trying to make sure that they're prepared for the world. Lila, she's special to me, Sarah. She is. But I don't want her to be soft. I don't want her to expect things just because of who she is. The world won't care about her last name, and I wanted her to learn that." I felt a sharp pang in my chest. It wasn't that I didn't understand what she was saying, it was just that her way of showing it felt so foreign, so cold. The truth was, I didn't know how to make sense of what she was telling me. My mother had always been tough. But it had never felt like this before. This was something darker, something that left a scar that wouldn't heal. "You could have done all of that without humiliating her, Sylvia," I said, the hurt bleeding into my voice now. "You could have been there for her, guided her. But instead, you treated her like an object to be shaped. You made her feel worthless. There was another long pause as Sylvia looked down at her desk, her face unreadable. I wasn't sure if I was waiting for an apology or if I just needed her to hear me. Either way, it didn't feel like I was getting through to her. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, I said finally, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. But I needed you to understand. And I needed you to know that it wasn't just about a job. It was about family. And you crossed a line. Sylvia didn't respond. She just stared at her hands, her knuckles white from the pressure of gripping the edges of her desk. I wasn't sure if she was processing what I had said, or if she just couldn't understand why I was so upset. But I knew one thing: I couldn't walk away from this feeling like I had somehow lost my daughter to something I could never get back. I stood up to leave, my heart heavy, my mind tangled in a web of emotions I couldn't untangle. I'll talk to Lila, I said, my voice quieter now. But this can't keep happening. Sylvia didn't look up as I turned to leave. I don't know if she was ashamed or just too stubborn to show it, but I didn't need her to say anything else. I had made my peace. For now, at least. I left Sylvia's office feeling as though I had just closed the door on something irreparably broken. There was no catharsis in the conversation, no resolution that made me feel lighter. My mother's cold, indifferent response only cemented my belief that I'd done the right thing by taking Lila out of that job, but the cost was so much higher than I had anticipated. The relationship with my mother was crumbling right in front of me, and I couldn't tell if it was worth it. For the next few days, I focused on Lila. She had been distant for so long, and I knew she needed to feel like she was supported, really supported, during all of this. I kept asking her how she felt, how she was holding up. She told me she felt better, but it wasn't the relief I had hoped to hear. I could still see the remnants of the shame and hurt in her eyes, but over time, as we spent more time together, she began to open up again. Slowly, she regained a bit of her spark, the joy I knew she had in her. It made me feel like, maybe, just maybe, we could move on from this. But the guilt about my mother's behavior lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't really done enough to make her understand the damage she had caused. I still hadn't forgiven her, and part of me knew that I couldn't, at least not until she truly acknowledged what she had done. Then came the day when everything changed. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee and reading the news on my phone, when I got a text from Lila. It was short, but enough to send a shiver down my spine. "Mom, I just got an email from Grandma. You need to see this." I frowned and opened my email, clicking on the attachment she had sent me. My mother had forwarded me a letter, a formal letter of apology, addressed not just to me, but to Lila as well. I sat there, blinking in disbelief as I read the words. "Dear Sarah and Lila, I am writing this letter to both of you because I owe you both an apology. I have spent a lot of time reflecting on my actions over the past few weeks, and I have come to the realization that I crossed a line with how I treated Lila. I let my own rigid beliefs about the world cloud my judgment and my actions, and I am deeply sorry for how I made her feel. Lila, you are a smart, talented, and capable young woman, and you did not deserve to be humiliated in my office. The tasks I assigned to you were wrong, and I see now that I took my own expectations for granted. I wanted you to learn toughness, but I now understand that what you needed was guidance and support. Sarah, I know I haven't always been the easiest person to deal with, and I know I have a tendency to push people too hard. But I want you to know that I never wanted to hurt you or your daughter. I made a mistake, and I am truly sorry for it. I hope you both will consider giving me a chance to make it right. I can't change what I did, but I can learn from it. And I will do better. Sincerely, Sylvia." The words on the screen were so uncharacteristic. I had never seen my mother apologize like this. Not to me. Not to anyone. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I should feel relief or suspicion. Was this just another way for her to maintain control, to get us back under her thumb? But then I read it again, and something in me softened. This wasn't a manipulative letter, it was an acknowledgement. A real one. It was the first time she had admitted to being wrong in all the years I'd known her. I showed the letter to Lila, and she read it silently. Her face was hard to read, but when she looked up at me, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, maybe hope, maybe healing. "I think she means it," she said softly. I wasn't sure if I could forgive her right away. After everything that had happened, it would take time. But this was the first step, and for Lila's sake, I knew we needed to move forward, however slowly. I decided to call my mother. My heart pounded as I dialed her number, unsure of how the conversation would go. She picked up on the first ring, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. "Sarah," she said, almost as if she had been waiting for my call. "I got your letter," I said, not sure what else to say. I could feel a weight lifting off my chest, even though I was still uncertain. "And I'm glad you apologized. Lila and we needed to hear that." There was a pause, and then she spoke again, her voice soft but steady. "I'm glad you got it. And I'm glad that you're willing to listen. I know I hurt both of you, and I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I do hope that, over time, I can prove to you that I can do better. I don't want to be the kind of person who keeps making the same mistakes." I sat there, processing her words. Part of me wanted to say something sharp, something that would make her feel the weight of what she had done. But then I thought about Lila, about what this meant for her, and how much she had already been through. The anger I had been holding on to felt less important than giving my daughter the opportunity to heal. "I appreciate that," I said, my voice steady. "But this isn't just about me. This is about Lila, and you need to show her you respect her. You need to show her that she is enough, just as she is." "I know," she said quietly. "I will. I promise." We didn't talk for much longer after that. I didn't need to hear any more. What mattered was that my mother had said what she needed to say, and it was up to us to decide what came next. In the days that followed, Sylvia reached out to Lila several times, asking if she'd like to meet for coffee, to talk. Lila was hesitant at first, unsure of what would happen or what would be said. But I encouraged her to go. After all, healing was a process, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. Lila agreed to meet her, and I could tell when she came back that something had shifted. It wasn't a magical transformation, but there was a lightness to her step, a peace that hadn't been there before. My mother, for all her flaws, had started to make amends. She had shown up for Lila in a way that no one else could. As for me, I wasn't ready to forgive Sylvia fully yet. It would take time, and that was okay. But I knew that she had taken the first step toward redemption. And that meant something. Maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what had been broken, not in the way it once was, but in a way that would allow us to move forward. My mother had tried to break Lila's spirit, but in doing so, she had inadvertently given me the chance to defend her, to show her the strength of my love. And that, in itself, was a kind of victory, a victory not through cruelty, but through standing up for the ones we love and refusing to let them fall. The next time my mother called, I answered with a calm heart, knowing that our path forward might be slower than I wanted, but it was one we could take together. At least, for now, it was enough. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.